before I get started, I just wanted to thank Beth for inviting us to be here. I want to thank the parish for hosting us and all the volunteers that helped put this together. It's an act of spiritual will, and it takes a lot of work to pull something like this off. So I'm just so grateful that we had an opportunity to be together and to learn together. I got the pro-life bug in about 2005, very late. I was raised in just a normal suburban Jewish family. We worked hard, we studied. We were not socially conscious. My mother was pro-choice, and that's about all I knew, except that, like so many of us growing up, we were taught, and this is what so many Jewish people are taught, that abortion is okay. You can do anything you want until it starts to be born, and then you can't touch it. And I thought it sounded kind of strange, but whatever. I went off to college. I was very socially awkward, isolated. I wasn't in the dating culture, but I saw a revolving door between the student health center and the abortion clinic. And I just watched it, and I thought, I'm not going to make a judgment about that because that's not going to be my problem. And it wasn't my problem. And so I had a lot of other problems. I think one of the reasons I ended up having a sensitivity to this issue was I got sick early on in my, I guess, late teens. I had some pretty significant challenges. And so looking back on it, I'm so grateful for it because I'm sure I would have gotten into trouble. And I think if I had been in trouble and had to have an abortion, I don't think I'd be alive today. But my years of isolation kept me out of that problem. And although it was very, very difficult for me, I look back, I'm so grateful to how God works. And that I can be here today, and I'm relatively well today, and so I can be here and be healthy and share. I was mentored, in 2005 I was listening to a national public radio program. They were looking at the review of the ban on partial birth abortion that had been passed in the Supreme Court, and I was listening to the program and I heard a Jewish woman screaming on that program about her civil rights being curtailed because she wasn't legally able to commit infanticide or have a doctor commit infanticide. And I thought to myself, that is so offensive and that sounds so strange. I don't understand that. And I thought, other people listening to this are going to think that all Jewish people believe this. And I may not have been educated on the subject, and I may have actually not had cared for a long time, but I just was mortified and embarrassed and ashamed that our Jewish culture would be seen in this light. So I started to investigate and learn. I had recently learned how to turn a computer on, and I got on it. And I learned the truth, and I was horrified. And I connected with a wonderful mentor from the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation who said to me, "Oh, you're an answer to prayer. We've been praying for years that a Jewish person would get involved in the pro-life movement." I thought, oh, that's just... And it did surprise me because I felt in my life, just the way my life had gone, that despite my opposition, God had me wherever He wanted me, whenever He wanted me there. So I've decided, as I said, to start our group, and I incorporated it in 2006. And the other thing he told me was always to remember that when you're talking about this issue, there are people in the audience that have had abortion, or who have paid for an abortion, or who know someone that's had an abortion, and to always be respectful. And so I try to do that. And lastly, because I was able to come through my life without having an abortion experience personally, it was not through virtue, let me tell you. I was, as I said, I was neutral at best about it. And so when I talk to people, I try to understand that I know what it's like to not understand this issue. I know what it's like to have been raised with a certain belief system and to really believe in what I think and have it define me, and then all of a sudden to be exposed to a truth that then I have a choice about whether I examine that truth and what it means to me and how I define myself, or I don't examine it. These are very, very difficult evolutions to go through as a person. So anyway, I put this slideshow together to just show what I've learned about the issue and about what I've learned about my faith tradition. And I'm so glad I learned that actually Judaism is the original pro-life religion, because if it hadn't been, I would not call myself a Jew today. So yes, okay, I always start with this prayer. Dear Lord, may there be abundant peace from heaven and good life upon us and upon all Israel. Amen. One of my favorite rabbis, Maimonides, he was a pro-life rabbi back in the day, and this is what he said, among many other wonderful things. He said, men like the opinions to which they have been accustomed from their youth. They defend them and shun contrary views, and this is one of the things that prevents men from finding truth, for they cling to the opinions of habit. And I like to remind my Jewish friends of this. We're asking ourselves to open our mind. Just a little bit about our foundation. Cutie pie. That's the cutie pie. We are a 501c3 educational organization. Since 2006, we've been saving Jewish lives by promoting life-saving solutions to unplanned pregnancy in the Jewish community. We provide education about the development, viability, and sanctity of unborn life, as well as traditional Jewish law regarding abortion. We inspire Jews to welcome preborn Jewish children into the inclusive movement of modern Jewish life and religion. We also provide adoption and pregnancy care referrals. We teach our community about the harmful effects of abortion and provide support to Jewish men and women who suffer from post-abortion syndrome. And that's what we do. This is just an outline of what we're going to talk about today. And after each segment, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. So feel free at those times to just shout out any questions you might have. So we're going to just examine the biblical period first. Despite what your Jewish friends may have told you, abortion is prohibited in Judaism, just as murdering any innocent is prohibited. Our Talmud, which is basically a Rabbinic Opinions based on the 5 books of Moses, says that a fetus is included in the Noahide prohibition of bloodshed, distinct from homicide. That is learned from Genesis 9:6. He who spills the blood of man within man shall have his blood spilt. This was the direct original translation of the verse from the Old Testament. The Talmud interprets the blood of man in man as to include a fetus, which is the blood of man in man. Things that are prohibited under the Noahide laws are also prohibited to Jews. The penalty of having his blood spilt, as interpreted by Maimonides, is referring to a punishment by the hands of heaven, and not by the courts or man to man. And you may have heard this quoted before from our Talmud that says, whoever destroys a soul is considered as if he has destroyed an entire world. So each soul is precious in the eyes of God. And then I just took some quotes, of course, out of the Old Testament. The Noahide law, do not murder. Genesis, here we go again. Whoso sheddeth man's blood within man, shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. And you be fruitful and multiply, swarm in the earth and multiply therein. And then in Exodus, of course, part of our 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. Leviticus, there's several prohibitions against child sacrifice. This is one of them. And thou shalt not give any of thy seed or set them apart to Moloch, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. And then in Deuteronomy, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that I have set before thee life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore choose life, that thou mayest live, thou and thy seed. There's a picture of our Torah that we study on our Sabbath. And then our prophets, we have Jeremiah, and this is a beautiful scripture that many pro-life people use. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet of nations. And then Isaiah, the Lord called me when I was in the womb. Before my birth, he had pronounced my name. So this is in, of course, direct opposition to the it's not alive until it's born opinion. And then from our scriptures, from Ecclesiastes, as thou knowest not what is the way of the world, nor how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child, even so thou knowest not the work of God who doeth all things, the mystery again of life. And then our Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret places. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to me. I found a beautiful little video on YouTube. It just encapsulates our traditions so sweetly. We're gonna play it.
God is the creator of life. A Bible says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. For you were created, my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works is wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in a secret place, and I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me was written in your book, for one of them came to be. Psalm 139, 13-16. For I know the plans I have for you, cares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, for not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. Jeremiah 29:11.
Does anybody have any questions, comments so far? Okay, go on to Rabbinical Opinions. Again, my favorite rabbi, Maimonides. His opinion was that the definition of murder according to the Noahide laws includes a person who kills even one unborn in the womb of its mother, and adds that such a person is liable for the death penalty. You will not hear this in contemporary rabbinical circles. But that was his opinion. Judaism, in its pragmatism, also rendered an exception to the prohibition on abortion. The exception is to save the life of the mother exception. The Mishnah, which is one of our foundational books in Judaism, explicitly indicates that one must abort a fetus if the continuation of pregnancy might imperil the physical life of the mother. If a woman is in hard travail, in other words, a breech birth, one cuts up the offspring in her womb and brings it forth member by member, because her life comes before the life of her fetus. But if the greater part has proceeded forth, one may not set aside one person for the sake of another person. This exception to the prohibition of abortion was intended to be used only in the case of imminent death of the mother because of breech birth, when the baby would act as a danger or erodive to the mother. So in Judaism, we can kill in self-defense. And so in this situation, a child that, if the child was not aborted, would kill the mother, is seen as the one exception to when abortion could be utilized. Of course, now, Currently, only 1% of pregnancies present a life-threatening situation for the mother. And former United States Surgeon General Dr. C. Everett Koop stated publicly in his 38 years as a pediatric surgeon, he was never aware of a single situation in which a freeborn child's life had to be taken in order to save the mother's life. In fact, ectopic pregnancy is primarily the only valid exception today. And I've been blessed to work with the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, they've connected with us, and this is their statement, that generally speaking, it's only ectopic pregnancy. All other medical situations, the child can be taken and saved early on if it's a problem for the mom. But here's part of our issue in Judaism, that the exceptions to the prohibition against abortion in Judaism have expanded. Until now, abortion is accepted through all 9 months of pregnancy by many Jews and Jewish leaders in America and Israel. Since the destruction of the temples and subsequent dispersions and exile, Jewish abortion opinions have been influenced by secular cultures, and Torah has been misused to justify unlimited abortion practices. This is the exact language from Exodus. And should men quarrel and hit a pregnant woman and she miscarries, but there is no fatality, he shall surely be punished when the woman's husband makes demands of him, and he shall give restitution according to the judge's orders. But if there is a fatality, you shall give a life for a life. This has long been used by abortion advocates to reframe abortion as legal in Judaism. Though the text is not a license to abort an unborn child, rather it is a reference to involuntary manslaughter, which is not a capital crime. One of the most respected rabbis, this Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, who was a renowned scholar of the Talmud, the Mishnah, Jewish law, he warned, because he saw that this was happening, he warned the Torah is compared to the Sinai, the burning bush, because fire gives heat, light, and devours fuel. But the light of Torah must only give warmth and light, love and hope. It must never be used to destroy or kill. This is not Torah, it is a perversion of Torah. Another perversion of the language in our Bible has been about viability. So in Numbers, which is one of the 5 books of Moses, there's text that says, "Count the children of Levi according to their father's house, according to their families. Count all males from the age of 1 month and upward." So this has been used to say that the unborn child is not considered a person. The census methodology counted only male babies 1 month of age and older because that milestone was considered the age of viability at that time. It is not a statement of non-personhood for unborn children or children under the age of 1 month or for females. It is merely a pragmatic method of counting. This text should not be used as a Torah-based argument for killing unborn children or killing children under 1 month of age, just as it cannot be used as justification for killing females at any age. Of course, now this has become relevant with the recent lifting of abortion restrictions to children born alive after abortion. Viability is now an astonishing 22 weeks. With neonatal care, babies live outside the womb. Many thrive and go on to live normal, healthy lives, and one such miracle of life is shown below. And this little gal was born at 21 weeks, 4 days, and now she's a healthy 3-year-old.
Turn the head the other way, right? I know. Okay, if you would connect me to this. You're doing good, man.
Put my hands in it.
Okay. 7 to 8. Okay, we're there.
Is that the oral or the teaching? Go ahead.
Let's, I'm good now.
Is that good? She's not like a half.
On one side of the hospital, these babies are being saved. On the other side of the hospital, they're being thrown away. Rape and incest is another opinion strongly held by most Jews, where it's okay to abort a child. Unfortunate circumstances of conception need not determine who lives or dies. While the reputation of the mother and family may be damaged because of a pregnancy due to rape or incest, a healthy child and a healthy mother is not a direct threat to the mother's physical life. According to the Mishnah Torah, a mamzar, a person conceived through incest or rape, is not allowed to marry a Jew or have a Jewish lifestyle. The death penalty is not the punishment for this unfortunate circumstance of birth. Fathers shall not put to death because of sons, nor shall sons be put to death because of fathers. Each man shall be put to death for his own transgression. Here's a lovely woman, Miss Pennsylvania, who was conceived in rape. She's so beautiful. So adoption is life-saving, and only God knows the contribution of the child to this world. Rabbi Schneerson is beloved. He's passed on now, but he was beloved in an observant community called the Chabad community. And in 1971, his opinion was, should there be those who desire to persuade you that God forbid you perform an abortion, tell them that this constitutes deliberate murder of a creature who is yet unable to protect himself from those who seek to murder him. And Rabbi J. David Blythe, who's the greatest authority on Jewish law that you can find, he's written volumes and volumes. This is what he said. A Jew is governed by such reverence for life that he trembles lest he tamper unmindfully with the greatest of all divine gifts, the bestowal or withholding of which is the prerogative of God alone. Although he be master over all within the world, there remain areas where man must fear to tread, acknowledging the limits of his sovereignty and the limitations of his understanding. In the unborn child lies the mystery and enigma of existence. Confronted by the miracle of life itself, man can only draw back in silence before the wonder of the Lord. And oh, how I wish the majority of rabbis would adopt this opinion. This is Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. This is Aaron's brother. And this is what he said. I consider the society of today as insane. I read from the press that in Eretz Yisrael, they permit abortions now. Sapphire comes to the U.S. and asks that 60,000 boys and girls should leave the U.S. and settle in Eretz Yisrael. When a child is born, it's also immigration to Eretz Yisrael, and yet you murder the child. He said, and if you kill the fetus, a time will come when even infants will be killed. The mother will get frightened after the baby will be born, and the doctor will say her life depends upon the murder of the baby. And you have a word, mental hygiene. Whatever you want, you can subsume under mental hygiene. And there is now a tendency for rabbis in the U.S. to march along with society, otherwise they'll be looked upon as reactionaries. And again, in New York we see this, where it is now legal to kill born infants. So yes, we go to the rabbis for wisdom. A lot of wisdom there. Now, so we're going to hear about what an abortion survivor has to say about the issue.
Thank you so much for your time this morning, Mr. Chairman and representatives. 327,653. This is the number of abortions that Planned Parenthood's 2014 fiscal report lists as being completed that year. Based on these numbers, 897 children will lose their lives to an abortion completed by Planned Parenthood each and every day. Why do I find this horrific? Because I actually have a lot in common with them. I was meant to be one of them. I should have been just another statistic, but by the grace of God, I am more than a statistic. I come here to you today as a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a master's level prepared social worker, and yes, as an abortion survivor. From a botched abortion to the dreaded complication, a child who lives, I've been called just about everything that you can imagine. But if you want to turn your attention up to the screen, as you can see in my medical records from 1977, kind of right there in the middle, saline infusion for an abortion was done, but was unsuccessful. And in other times throughout my medical records, you will read statements like, the complication of my birth mother's pregnancy was a saline infusion abortion. You could certainly say that saline infusion complicated the pregnancy. It has taken years to unravel the secrets surrounding my survival, to have contact with my biological family, and even medical professionals that cared for me. And although there are still unanswered questions, what I do know is that my life was intended to be ended by that abortion. And even after I survived, my life was in jeopardy. You wouldn't know it by looking at me today, but in August of 1977, I also survived a saline infusion abortion. And as Gianna shared, that saline infusion abortion involves injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding the preborn child. The intent of that toxic salt solution is to scald the child to death from the outside in. For days, I soaked in that toxic salt solution, and on the 5th day of the procedure, my biological mother, who was a 19-year-old college student, delivered me after her labor was induced. I should have been delivered dead that day as a successful abortion. In 2013, I learned through contact with my biological mother's family that not only was this abortion forced upon her against her will at the age of 19, but also that it was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, a nurse, who delivered me in this final step of the abortion procedure at St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa. Unfortunately, I also learned that when my grandmother realized that the abortion had not succeeded in ending my life, she demanded that I be left to die. I may never know how exactly 2 nurses who were on staff that day found out about me, but what I do know is that their willingness to fight for medical care to be provided to me ultimately sustained my life. And I know where children like me were left to die at St. Luke's Hospital. I met a nurse there who delivered a child much like me in 1976. She delivered a little boy after a failed saline infusion abortion, but she followed her superior's orders, and she placed him there in a utility closet in a bucket of formaldehyde to be picked up later as medical waste after he was left there to die alone. A bucket of formaldehyde in a utility closet was meant to be my fate after I survived that abortion attempt. I weighed a little less than 3 pounds when I survived. I suffered from jaundice, severe respiratory problems, and seizures for an extended period of time. And one of the first notations in my medical records by a doctor after I survived is that I looked like I was about 31 weeks gestational age when I was delivered. Despite the miracle of my survival, the doctor's prognosis for my life was very poor initially. My adoptive parents were told that I would suffer from multiple disabilities throughout my life. Yet here I am today, perfectly healthy. Yet I know it isn't just how abortion ends the life of children like me that isn't talked about in today's world. It's also not discussed what happens to children like me who live. I can tell you we are your friend, your neighbor, your coworker, and you would likely never guess by passing us on the street that we survived what we did. In my work as the founder of the Abortion Survivors Network, I have had contact with 203 of these other survivors. Letters from some of those survivors have been submitted to this committee. I'm here today to share my story to not only highlight the horror of abortion taking place at Planned Parenthood, but to give a voice to other survivors like me, and most importantly, to give a name, a face, and a voice to the hundreds of thousands of children who will have their lives ended by Planned Parenthood this year alone. As you consider the horrors of what happens at Planned Parenthood each day, I would urge you to remember my story and Gianna's too. We may not have survived abortions at Planned Parenthood, but the expectation for our lives to be ended by abortion are the very same as those who do lose their lives there. And I have long believed that if my birth mother's abortion would have taken place at a Planned Parenthood, I would not be here today. Completing over 300,000 abortions a year provides them with the experience to make sure that failures like me don't exist. As a fellow American and as a fellow human being, I deserve the same right to life, the same equal protection under the law as each and every one of you. Yet we live in a time where not only do such protections not exist, but my own tax dollars and yours go to fund an organization that has perfected the very thing that was meant to end my life. And this must end.
And we'll finish with one more rabbi's opinion here, Rabbi Norman Lamb. The freedom of parents to crush prenatal life, which now seems to be in vogue, will eventually lead to utter destruction, he stated, because it is only a small leap of logic from feticide to infanticide, to getting rid of infants who may not fulfill our ideals of mental and physical health, or eventually ethnic and genetic respectability. Rabbi Lamb reiterated those themes in a sermon from 1976. Never, never must we allow this desacralization of life, whether in the form of benevolent euthanasia or free and easy abortions, or any of the other manifestations of this fundamental antagonism to life, to influence us. And of course, we're facing this very thing today in so many states around the country. All right, so that concludes our rabbinical segment. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Can you explain what you mean by babies that are born alive are being killed in, you mentioned New York, and you just mentioned several, lots of states today. I didn't know about that, and I wonder what your source is. Tell us more about it.
Sure, surely. Well, so there's a point of viability of children in the womb. And of course, for example, first trimester abortions are done, and the method used destroys the baby. And then in second trimester abortions, so it's just getting later along in the growth of the child, right? Generally speaking, the method of abortion is dismemberment abortion at that point, okay? Because the baby is still young enough where the parts can be dismembered and taken out piece by piece. But as you get further along, late second and into third trimester, the babies are viable. Like the little baby that you saw, Naomi, she was born in 21, 22 weeks, right? So at that point, these babies, if they're born, they can survive outside the womb with neonatal care. And in an abortion procedure, as this woman spoke of, as her experience as an abortion survivor, her saline abortion actually failed to induce death inside the womb, right? And she was born alive. Third trimester abortions or late-term abortions are legal around the country in certain states. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But often that these babies are too large, basically, to pull apart. Okay, so what happens is over a period of so many days, the woman's labor is induced, and then the baby is born partially. Like they bring it out feet first. Okay. Or they just allow the baby to be born because it's safer that way for the mother rather than causing all these problems inside of her. So oftentimes the baby is actually alive and viable when it comes out. And unbeknownst to many people, for many, many years these babies have actually been allowed to die or directly killed by the abortionist. This was seen in the Gosnell situation where that Kermit Gosnell, who had a late-term abortion facility in Philadelphia, for years had been delivering born alive children, allowing them to die or killing them. He finally got caught and prosecuted, and now he's in jail. So what's happening now is because he got caught for doing something that they've been doing a lot of, but it just hasn't been in the public view, the state of New York recently decriminalized all abortion procedures and now allows, when the baby is born alive, that the doctor can kill it and there's no criminal liability attached to it. So that now in New York, when a baby is born alive after abortion, it can be killed and the doctor can't be prosecuted. Mexico has had a late-term abortion policy for years, and they are now in the process of trying to decriminalize doing away with the babies when they're born alive. Vermont is trying to pass a bill. Well, you should, yeah, Vermont, and several other states.
Thank you for that explanation, and I'm a little confused because I can't imagine that anybody would think that, I mean, aborting the baby, having the baby come out of the womb is one thing, and then after it's out of the womb, letting somebody kill it is just like a totally different thing. And I can't imagine how state legislators or whoever it is voted for that to be not criminalized would do it. But it's a different issue from whether the abortion should happen.
Well, yes, it seems like it's a different issue, which is part of the interesting part about understanding this. It's actually not different because it's killing a child. It's just killing a child outside of the womb rather than inside the womb. But we see it differently, right? But it is unimaginable.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to add to Ken's statement. The New York legislature publicly cheered when they passed that law.
They celebrated it. They celebrated it. And Virginia also.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in the U.S. Senate, Senator Sass from Nebraska put forward legislation to criminalize these abortions, and it was voted down. It was actually voted down by our 2 senators from New Hampshire. They said that they didn't believe that was a criminal act. There's still more to be fought, but it's pervasive now. It's not just in state legislatures.
Is that like criminalizing the abortion?
Absolutely.
Or criminalizing the killing after the abortion?
The way the Senator Sass says that once the child is outside of the womb of the mother, it's outside the realm of abortion now.
Yeah.
Now I have a living, breathing human.
Right.
Right? And so he put forward legislation to make that a criminal act.
Yeah.
It was voted down in the U.S. Senate to say no, that it's not a criminal act, and our 2 senators from New Hampshire voted to put that law
Because they
down.
keep thinking that it's part of abortion, and it
Right.
had nothing to do with abortion.
Correct.
The baby was already delivered.
Right.
Yeah, it's same way.
There was, just a couple of days ago, an article written in the Wall Street Journal by Planned Parenthood, and it was the propaganda speak, but basically Planned Parenthood was saying, we don't do these things that we're discussing right now, and they said, as you well know, infanticide is illegal, and that's confusing to me, because isn't that infanticide, and where is it illegal? If indeed this can go on in New Hampshire and the other states that have no restrictions, I just wonder if you can help to clarify what Planned Parenthood is talking about. I understand that it's their propaganda, but what's the difference between infanticide? What is infanticide then, if it isn't what we're talking about?
They mean to confuse you. They don't want you to understand exactly what's going on. In my synagogue last week, I spoke out against this. And a woman approached me after the services, and she is very intelligent, educated, in the know person. And she said, I misunderstood. I didn't know that they were doing that they were actually killing babies that were still alive. And I said, well, they don't want you to understand that, because if you knew what was going on, you would reject it.
Well, this one here just says that Planned Parenthood specifically says, no, we don't do that after the baby's born.
Right, and we know that they do.
So that's just a fact question, that's not a
But my
question that
question
should
is,
be.
what is Planned Parenthood referring to in the law? They say, as we well know, infanticide
Yes.
is against the law.
Well,
So-
yes. Well, the ban on partial birth abortion was one step of federal law that said you couldn't bring these babies into the world and then murder them, okay? And then there's the statutes against murdering people. I mean, that's a criminal, it's a capital crime, right? But in their mind, if the baby was meant to die anyway, that gives them wiggle room. See, so they're not going to come out and say that they do this because they don't want the liability. But believe me, they and their dollars were behind the lobbying efforts to get this. There's just a lot of money in third trimester abortions. And there's a slide about that later.
I mean, blatantly, we know that Planned Parenthood lies all the time.
Yeah.
They're under all kinds of litigation for their lies. But I wouldn't believe anything that they say.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay, status of the unborn. So we love Rabbi David Novak. He's on our board. When I went and spoke with lots of different rabbis to gain some understanding and support, he was the only one that spoke up immediately and said, I'll be on your board. I didn't really even know what a board of directors was then. Like, it sounds good. He's hung in there with us since 2006, and we're so proud of him. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Sanctity of Human Life. Now, he is a free thinker, a very intelligent man. He's an open-minded person, and he said, this is part of what he writes. He said, thus, the discovery of DNA when it first emerges in a human being should change our thinking about the beginning of human life in the same way that the discovery that babies born in the 8th month of pregnancy are viable. This changed our thinking about early infant life, even though in the days of the Talmud, people believed that they were not viable. Jews are bound by halakhic norms, that means Jewish law. With regard to questions of human life and death, however, they are not bound to some of their applications that are based on what we now know to have been inaccurate, outdated science. The science of the Talmud has been superseded by more current science, which itself might be superseded in the future. So what he's referring to is the propensity of Jewish legal scholars to deny the right to life of an unborn child, even though, as I mentioned earlier, our religious documents state that life should be protected. But unfortunately, because of secular influences, many rabbis today allow abortion based on what I consider to be fake Judaism. So, but they capitalize on fake Judaism to promote their opinion. But this gentleman doesn't. So grateful to have him on our side. Then, of course, science. What does science say about the unborn child? By all the criteria of modern molecular biology, life is present from the moment of conception. And then from Harvard University Medical School, it is incorrect to say that biological data cannot be decisive. It is scientifically correct to say that an individual human life begins at conception. Our laws, one function of which is to help preserve the lives of our people, should be based on accurate scientific data. And then from every textbook of embryology, we read, human development begins at fertilization, the process during which a male gamete or sperm unites with a female gamete to form a single cell called a zygote. This highly specialized, totipotent cell marked the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. A zygote is the beginning of a new human being. The American Medical Association is an interesting organization. As far back as 1857, they declared that the independent and actual existence of the child before birth as a living being is a matter of objective science. They deplored the medieval opinion that reflected popular ignorance that the fetus is not alive until after the period of quickening. Now, of course, the AMA, if you go to their website, they are solidly supportive of abortion.
What do they say about this, about the former AMA opinion?
They don't say. It's not on the website. Well, these are outdated and erroneous opinions on the status of the unborn child. These are, again, justifications for allowing abortion because, of course, it dehumanizes the child. So the unborn child is considered to be mere water until its 40th day. The unborn child is an appendage of its mother. The unborn child is created when bones and arteries begin to form, and the unborn child is not alive until she's born. These are all false. The truth is that the unborn child is a separate individual from the mother, different genetic code, different blood type, perhaps a different gender. Could be a different race if they've been created through in vitro fertilization. We have situations where the mother has died and the baby is still alive. We've had, of course, when the baby has died and the mother is still alive, so there are definitely two different persons there. And in the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, a pregnant woman cannot be executed because, of course, it would take the life of her child. And I love this quote, "The preborn child is not a potential human being, but rather a human being with potential." So let's go on to the actual status of the unborn. The unborn child is alive, the unborn child is human, and the unborn child is a person. The unborn child is in early stages of development, differing only from a born person in 4 ways: the size, the environment, the level of development, and the level of dependency. Changing the meaning of words doesn't change reality. The only objective questions we can ask are, is it human? That is, did it come from human beings? Is it a genetically unique individual? Is it alive and growing? Like toddler and adolescent, the terms embryo and fetus do not refer to non-humans, but to humans at particular stages of development. Regardless of what you have been told, I am not a clump of cells. And then, of course, the gestational milestones. Most significant developmental milestones occur long before birth, during the first 8 weeks following conception, when most body parts and all body systems appear and begin to function. The heart beats at 22 days, brain waves can be measured around 6 weeks. At 9 weeks, all internal organs are present and the baby is sensitive to touch. So we now know the science is well established that every abortion, does end the life of a human being. And here's just a beautiful story. I came across this. I actually met this photographer who took a picture of this little boy. So the Hand of Hope, this picture was taken during the medical procedure to fix the spina bifida lesion on Samuel Armas, who was 21 weeks old at the time. The operation was performed by a surgical team at Vanderbilt University. The photographer recounts, he was in the operating room taking pictures of this procedure because it was such a groundbreaking surgical procedure. Suddenly, an entire arm thrust out of the opening, then pulled back until just a little hand was showing. The doctor reached over and lifted the hand, which reacted and squeezed the doctor's finger. As if testing for strength, the doctor shook the tiny fist. Samuel held firm. I took the picture. Wow, it happened so fast that the nurse standing next to me asked, "What happened?" "The child reached out," I said. "Oh, they do that all the time," she responded. So he grew up. He's a healthy child today. This picture was very controversial. In fact, I read later, I don't know if anybody here reads the Drudge Report, but Drudge used to work for Fox News, and he wanted to report on this story, and they wouldn't let him, and he quit. That's how he was so convicted about this. Because, of course, this shows the humanity of the child in the womb. And lastly, what does the abortionist say? Even abortionists know. We can accept that the embryo is a living thing in the fact that it has a beating heart, that it has its own genetic system within it. It is clearly human in the sense that it's not a gerbil, and we can recognize that it is human life. The point is not when does human life begin, but when does it really begin to matter. We're going to talk a little bit about that next. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay. So we're going to look at Jewish ethics and morals in here and how it is in such opposition to what happens with abortion. This was a wonderful, wonderful rabbi from Spain. This is what he wrote. There are 3 stages in a man's life. A, in the womb, B, in this world, and C, in the world to come. When the child is in the mother's womb, all his needs are met. If it were up to him, he would remain there forever. When he leaves the womb, it is because he has no choice in the matter. In truth, whatever takes place in the womb is wondrous and beyond our comprehension, such as how the infant exists in that environment and what it is that forces him at the appropriate time to emerge from there. Just as the understanding of the workings of this phenomenon is hidden from us, so too the work of God in general is hidden from our comprehension and is wondrous. The fact that we cannot comprehend it should not prevent us, however, from appreciating and seeing the hand of God and the wonders of his creation every day as we go about our daily lives. Back to Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik. This was the rabbi that warned not to use our Torah scriptures to kill. This is what he wrote after New York State legalized abortion in 1970. Sometimes we must protest under sacred and noble causes. It bleeds my heart that none of the Jewish organizations in New York protested. We are more guilty than any other people. We are more ashamed than any other generation. And this is his full statement. It bleeds my heart that none of the Jewish organizations, even none of the Orthodox organizations in New York, protested the recently passed abortion law under almost all circumstances, as long as the woman and her doctor agree. The rabbis in New York know that this law will lead to all forms of immorality. And they know that according to the Rambam, which is Moses Maimonides, my favorite rabbi, who said abortion is akin to murder, yet they are afraid to get involved, afraid to speak up. And he says, it is precisely because New York has a concentration of Jews that New York was the state to pass the new abortion law, and the Jewish members of the New York legislature supported the law. In fact, the legislature at first defeated the abortion bill, but one New York State senator, a Jew, who had at first voted against the bill, reported that on Pesach night, that's Passover, while sitting at the Seder, he had a pang of conscience and thought that by this vote against the abortion bill, he might cause difficulty and suffering to some girl who would otherwise have solved her problem by obtaining an abortion. Then he switched his vote and the bill was passed. Why did not any of the rabbis in New York reassure him that his first thoughts had been right? Okay. The abortion industry in New York is very, very strong, and it still has a lot of Jewish support for it. Here's another rabbi talking about ethics and Judaism. The theory and practice of universal ethics. The opposition of Noahide law to the abortion of an unborn life, except in very special circumstances, embodies one of the deepest norms of human society, the protection of life. In other words, Torah forbids abortion on demand, whether by a Jew or a non-Jew. The pragmatic consideration that if we insist on this, another reported religious position, which does not allow the exceptions provided by Noahide law, could also prevail, in fact, panders to moral relativism. It supports the extension of this global mass phenomenon of killing, both morally wrong itself with all kinds of further corrosive consequences for society. So too, it is spurious to allow a person a so-called civil liberty to abort. There is no such liberty to kill in the sights of the Noahide law. And then we have these other rabbis. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, he stated that abortion is murder, and today we are desensitized to this kind of murder because of its frequency. I would say that's true. And then Rabbi Dr. Moshe Tendler, abortion is included in the Noahide prohibition of murder. And this Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, he's venerated among religious Jews. He said, not only are Jews prohibited from having an abortion, except in the most extreme circumstances, but they are prohibited from assisting non-Jews from having an abortion too. According to halakha, which is our law, abortion is prohibited for non-Jews. It's actually a capital crime. A Jewish doctor may not perform an abortion even if it would result in antipathy towards Jews. He took the rare step at that time in saying that we shouldn't abort Down syndrome babies either. In my research on the internet, I have come across many anti-Semitic sites, and one of the things that fuels those opinions is the majority Jewish support of abortion. So when he says here, he warned that if Jews don't perform an abortion, it would cause people to be anti-Semitic. I'm not sure he understood that performing abortions causes anti-Semitism as well. Jewish ethics versus the abortion industry. Abortion industry practices dramatically contrast with Jewish ethics and moral guidelines in business, cleanliness, sexual propriety, responsibility to protect friends and neighbors from harm, dietary practices, honesty, and women's safety. Judaism prohibits desecrating the human body, but abortion destroys a human body, and the harvesting of baby parts for profit runs contrary to Jewish respect for the dead. Abortion providers have long been exempt from standard medical practices and regulatory oversight, and decades of illegal and unethical practices are finally being uncovered. Abortion providers perpetuate sex crimes by routinely failing to report evidence of sexual assault and sex trafficking. They fail to provide informed consent to patients and fail to counsel patients on alternatives to the abortion procedure or possible immediate and long-term negative consequences of the procedure. Recent undercover videos show illegal sales of body parts and the extreme violation of basic moral standards regarding dismemberment of born-alive babies. Aborted human fetal tissue is used in the manufacture of human vaccines, beauty care products, food flavor enhancers, and surreptitiously washed down the drain into municipal waste systems, eventually incorporated into biosludge crop fertilizer. We don't hear about this on the evening news because, unfortunately, the way our country is and the way our media is set up, they protect the industry. But certainly if you knew that in your beauty care products, in your children's vaccinations, in the fertilizer on the crops that you eat, and the rampant violation of medical and sanitary standards in abortion clinics, if we knew this, there would be much more opposition to abortion. We have a wonderful mystical tradition in Judaism that says there are three persons who drive away the Shekinah, which is the Holy Spirit, if you will, from the world, making it impossible for the Holy One, blessed be He, to fix his abode in the universe and causing prayers to be unanswered. The third is he who causes the fetus to be destroyed in the womb, for he destroys the artifice of the Holy One, blessed be He, and his workmanship. For these abominations the Spirit of holiness weeps. We have quite a contrast between our traditional Jewish ethics and morals and modern day practice. Any questions or comments? Yes, Sam.
When you were talking about what goes on in the abortion clinic, I don't know how many people here saw the movie Gazelle, but that showed what does occur. And they say these abortion clinics are just horrendous. People who have left the abortion industry report that. So.
Yes, I saw that movie. It was terrible watching that. I mean, you didn't actually see the abortion taking place there, but his clinic was horrendous, right? The health department of the state of Pennsylvania never inspected that facility. It was in Philadelphia. They turned a blind eye. Even though women were injured there, and the ambulances would come and all that, there was women that died there. The DEA went in there because there was drug trafficking going on in there. That's who went in there. The DEA went in there and found all that.
But the woman who was full term, and he went in to deliver her, and he said, "Oh, this baby could walk to kindergarten." That big.
Yes.
That is what is going to be happening with these babies, full term.
Yes. Now, you know, Unplanned is coming out.
Yes.
The movie, right? Abby Johnson. Yes, and she talks about what's going on in abortion clinics as well. So it's good. People need to be informed so that they can make an informed choice about how they feel about the issue. If we only hear one side of it, we really can't use our minds to discern, and to discern what our conscience tells us, right? So we do need to be informed. We talk about the abortion Holocaust, and there are just so many parallels to the Holocaust and the abortion Holocaust. So we're going to take a look at that. Rabbi Buchwald, this is what he said. There's a Holocaust taking place in America right now. We can't hear it because there are no barking dogs. We can't see it because there are no goose-stepping Nazi soldiers and no concentration camps. And we can't smell it because there are no gas chambers. But the net result is exactly the same. If we fail to act now, the silent Holocaust will have done its job. Hitler will have emerged victorious. first chief rabbi of Israel. He wrote about abortion in Israel. He said, "It is a hideous sin, a double sin against the laws of our holy Torah and against the future of our Jewish nation. It is a grave sin against the laws of our sacred Torah, which is a Torah of life, which desires life and the multiplication of life." So Israel has a very liberal abortion policy as well as the United States. Jewish women in Nazi Germany were forced to have abortions. Now, I'm just telling you this because if you go to, like I go do some sidewalk advocacy work, and I can't tell you how many escorts bringing ladies into Planned Parenthood are Jewish. And we're going to talk about this later. Abortion experiments were done on pregnant Jewish women in the death camps, researching violent, torturous ways of killing unborn Jewish children and destroying their mothers. Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning, lost his first child to Nazi-forced abortion. Then his first wife was murdered at Auschwitz. RU-486, the abortion pill, is manufactured by a subsidiary of IG Farben, which is the German company that manufactured Zyklon B, the gas used to exterminate Jews in World War II. So what we're saying is, this happened in the early, the eugenics, euthanasia, all that started happening around the 1900s, 1910s, utilized by the Nazis, and then it just continued after the war. Yes, the use of language. A lot of this comes from one of the pamphlets I have over on the table. Abortion advocates work tirelessly to maintain legal abortion from conception to birth, referring to unborn children as inhuman, not alive, growths, blobs of tissue, contents of the uterus, products of conception, parasites, research material, and garbage. This propaganda worked well for eugenicists in the last century and continues to work well in this century. So I have some contrasts. Then, in 1936, the German Supreme Court refused to recognize Jews living in Germany as legal persons. From that point on, they had no rights or protection under the German Constitution. And shortly thereafter, the Nazis began their final solution, of course, putting over 6 million Jews to death. In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court, in its Roe v. Wade decision, ruled that unborn babies were not legal persons. From that point on, they had no rights or protection under the U.S. Constitution. Since that decision, over 60 million babies have been put to death by abortion in this country. Adolf Hitler called the Jews only a parasite in the body of other peoples. And Gloria Steinem said, in her wisdom, "A woman should have the right to abortion just as she has the right to remove any parasitic growth from her body." That's what she said in 1989. Jews are subhuman. Then, the subhuman, that biologically seemingly complete creation of nature with hands, feet, and a kind of brain with eyes and mouth, is nevertheless a completely different, dreadful creature. He's only a rough copy of a human being with human-like facial traits, but nevertheless morally and mentally lower than an animal. For all that bear a human face are not equal. Okay. And then unborn babies are subhuman. Fetuses, especially those as old as 5 or 6 months, elicit our sympathy because they look disconcertingly like people. But this sympathy is misplaced. While it may perhaps possess some flickering of sensation or some capacity to feel pain, this is equally true of creatures like fish or insects. A proper respect for the right to life requires that it not be respected where it does not exist. And lastly, the whole medical research angle. Torture is medical research. To explain the concentration camp experiments, Dr. August Hirt supplied this rationale. "These condemned men will at least make themselves useful," he said. "Wouldn't it be ridiculous to execute them and send their bodies to the crematory oven without giving them an opportunity to contribute to the progress of society?" Was the doctor of death. And tortures medical research. In 1980, Kakamaki justified conducting experiments involving slicing open the stomachs and cutting off the heads of live, late-term aborted babies. An aborted baby is just garbage, and that's where it ends up, he declared. Why not make use of it for society? So it is dangerous to reduce issues of life and death to a semantic game in which we are free to redefine our terms because the redefinition may be used against us. I talk to Jews about this all the time. We were once dehumanized, right, and targeted for execution, and yet When we do that to the unborn child, we're causing, our own demise. And we're actually perpetuating what was done to us. It makes no sense. More than 1.5 million children from across Europe were murdered under the Nazi regime. This figure includes more than 1.2 million Jewish children, tens of thousands of gypsy children, and thousands of institutionalized handicapped children who were murdered under Nazi rule in Germany and occupied Europe. The Nazis, obsessed with the notion of creating a biologically pure Aryan society, deliberately targeted Jewish children for destruction in order to prevent the growth of a new generation of Jews in Europe. And here are some just amazing pictures. We're going to talk a little bit about Margaret Sanger. Here's a poster. Planned Parenthood celebrates Roe v. Wade, killing more blacks and Jews in 30 years than the 1,000-year Reich could have ever imagined. And there's Margaret Sanger with Hitler. They were buddies. Jewish people just see Margaret Sanger as such a hero. They just love her. We teach our young daughters to emulate her. Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood October 16, 1916, in order to eliminate what she thought were inferior races like Orientals, Jews, and blacks. She referred to them as human weeds. Yeah. Her Birth Control League became a primary sponsor of eugenics during her lifetime. She associated herself with Adolf Hitler, praising him for his racial politics of eugenics. But she changed the name of American Birth Control League to Planned Parenthood Federation after World War II in order to disguise her anti-Semitic past. And she opened up her first birth control clinic in an immigrant population in New York. It was closed down in a couple of weeks, by the way, at that time. Planned Parenthood proudly supports the Women's March, even though its leaders are anti-Semitic. Oh yes, so many Jewish women participated in it 2 years ago in the Women's March, but this past year, there was so much anti-Semitism connected to it that, thank God, many of them declined to participate. Very similar to what Adolf Hitler said back in 1942, we must use every means to install in the population the idea that it is harmful to have several children, the expenses that they cause, and the dangerous effect on women's health. It will be necessary to open special institutions for abortions, and doctors must be able to help out there in case there is any question of this being a breach of their professional ethics, which is what we have today. The Nazis issued a decree banning all Jewish births, in other words, rendering abortion compulsory. The punishment for giving birth and for delivering the infant was death for the whole family and for the Jewish doctor or midwife. We have wonderful organizations in the Jewish community, but they have been corrupted by pro-abortion ideology. So we have this National Council of Jewish Women, which is basically a pro-abortion lobbying group now. And Hadassah, which is the Women's Zionist Organization of America that's created wonderful hospitals and does wonderful work, actually supports reproductive rights and itself commits first and second trimester abortions. And I just have a little bit here about Planned Parenthood. It's a favorite charity of Jewish donors. A lot of people donate to Planned Parenthood, which keeps it functioning, as well as our tax dollars. So they're a for-profit business. It's marketed as a nonprofit that cares for women, but it's actually a thriving business that profits by exploiting women. Its total revenue for 2016-17 was almost $1.5 billion. And of all funding received by Planned Parenthood, 37% of it comes from taxpayers. A baby is aborted at a Planned Parenthood facility somewhere in America every 94 seconds. In that same amount of time, Planned Parenthood receives over $1,100 in federal funding. The abortion business is all about monetary profit derived from the sacrifice of human capital. If there was no money in abortion, it wouldn't be legal. And you can see, over the years, women's health services have declined at Planned Parenthood, but their abortion numbers have gone up. And lastly, here's another reason for the late-term abortion decriminalization. There's so much money in it. The late-term abortion can cost $8,000 to $15,000 or more, and then the baby parts get sold. Women are just asked to sign the rights of their deceased baby away for medical research, and then the abortion clinics sell these baby parts for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. What began as just trying to help a woman out of a dicey situation has now become morally unacceptable and reprehensible, in my opinion.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The previous slide, you said that the abortion wouldn't be legal if there was no money in it. When New York adopted that abortion law in 1970, and when Roe versus Wade was passed in 1973, was people making money like this off of abortions, or were they non-profit?
No, people have always had to pay for abortions.
No, I know they pay, but it costs money. So did they make a profit off it after paying the facility and the doctor and whatever?
Yes. I have often reported on so many Jewish organizations, synagogues and Jewish community centers hosting Planned Parenthood fundraisers. There's a flyer for one that was in 2018. This Willie Parker, who was the keynote speaker of this one Planned Parenthood fundraiser, was recently in a debate where he actually admits that abortion kills a human being. When asked how many he had killed, he answers 20,000 or 30,000, what's the difference? And the guy that debated him said to him, well, the difference is 10,000 human beings. They love him in the abortion industry because he considers abortion to be a Christian moral imperative. Jews in the abortion industry, so here's the people that started the darn thing. We're all Jewish. A lot of these people, they immigrated to America from, for example, the Soviet Union, where Jews had given up their religious life in order to protect themselves from anti-Semitism. So they aligned with the Communist Party. Of course, that's irreligious. So they lost their religion. And they came over here, and that's part of how it started. So these were just some of them. This woman, Fania Mindell, she helped co-found America's first birth control clinic with Margaret Sanger. Bernard Nathanson, you may have heard of. He was the co-founder of NARAL. He had a very successful abortion mill. When ultrasound-guided abortions came online, he realized what he'd done, and he stopped doing abortions. Lawrence Lader, his work was referenced in the Roe v. Wade legal arguments. He co-founded NARAL. He was the one that convinced Betty Friedan to insert abortion rights into the National Organization for Women's platform. Alan Guttmacher, he was a eugenicist. He was a president of Planned Parenthood. He was a member of the Association of Voluntary Sterilization. Joyce Antler, this was the sole woman on the executive staff of New York City's Health Services Administration. She worked with the mayor to legalize abortion in New York City. And then Gloria Steinem, who we mentioned earlier. She founded Voters for Choice. She said recently, lack of ready access to abortion is the primary cause of global warming. And even today I heard some people talk about how we have to limit the number of children we have because the carbon footprint, So it's interesting what's happening. So this was Dr. Nathanson. He was directly involved in over 60,000 abortions, made a lot of money off her abortion, and then it says, Dr. Nathanson's study of developments in the science of fetology and his use of ultrasound to observe the unborn child in the womb led him to the conclusion that he had made a horrible mistake. Resigning from his lucrative position, Nathanson wrote that he was deeply troubled by his increasing certainty that I had in fact presided over 60,000 deaths. You can watch his movie, The Silent Screen, on YouTube, where he just shows this ultrasound-guided abortion. The images are not even clear like today's ultrasounds, but you can see what's happening. He said, modern technologies have convinced us beyond question the unborn child is simply another human being, another member of the human community, indistinguishable in every way from any of us.
Can I just say something about Brandon Nathanson?
Yeah.
He, in his book, Avoiding America,
Yeah.
I know it's old, but the thing of it is, if it wasn't for him and the people that were supporting him and wanted him to do what he was doing, he tells about how it was a setup. It was a total setup. Probably none of this would have ever happened if they didn't set it all up. It was the precursor for Roe versus Wade. And it's in that book.
Yes.
People don't read that anymore. It's
Yeah.
old.
Yes, I was recommended I buy it. I did get it off Amazon. I haven't read it. The print is like this small. It's so cool. It's really hard to read. 83% of Jews believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. 83%. That was from a 2014 poll, a Pew Forum poll. We had the highest percentage of people that believe that abortion should be legal in almost all cases.
Not by much. Buddhists are
The
82, unaffiliated are 73.
You know, this is being affected now by the new radical abortion laws. People are starting to rethink this. I just listened to a video the other day about this, and it's the people that want to limit abortion, the percentages are rising rapidly now after the New York decision.
You know, on that New York decision, the only station, whether you like Fox or not, was Fox News, spoke about Cuomo and the big celebration, and also West Virginia. And they gave just very spot announcements. And in the thing on West Virginia, they mostly spoke about all the money that governor was making, all of his financial things that were going on. So your ABC, NBC, CBS, all those, they don't highlight this. CNN, they don't say anything.
Yeah.
Swept under the carpet and then go on with the latest movie star that's getting her child's education. That are not going to show.
Well, it is wonderful that we have alternative sources, but we do have to look for them.
You do?
You know, you do have to.
What do you think of the fact that
Yeah, you did.
48% of Catholics believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases? Can
Yes.
that really be accurate?
It can be.
It's disturbing.
I have a close Catholic friend who's very pro-life, and I go on and on about how bad the Jews are, and she says, well, let me tell you, we're not doing a lot better. We're not doing much better. Even the priests are afraid to talk about it in a lot of parishes because they don't want to offend or put off, you know, Catholic pro-choicers who are in the pews tithing
So
every
many of
week.
the Catholics, and I know that others will say, well, personally, I'm against
Yes.
it, but I don't think I should have a right to say anybody. That's the excuse.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And yet we always say, if you saw somebody enslaving somebody else, you know, would you say, well, that's not for me, but it's okay for that other person to have a slave and torture that person? You know, it's morally disingenuous, but it's a way, you know, it's a way out of the argument. Yeah. And again, in 2018, 76% of Jews feel that abortion is morally acceptable. So it's very difficult. I was telling someone earlier, I don't have a lot of Jewish friends. Oh, whatever. I have more Catholic friends. And in Israel, the abortion numbers, they're pretty high. The high number of 40,000 abortions per year, that was the high number. You know, like in America, we say it was 1.3 or 1.6 million in the 70s, and it's going down now. In Israel, the high was about 40,000 per year. That was after the Russian immigration in the 1990s. Because again, those people were basically agnostic or atheist, and they brought their abortion attitudes with them to Israel. Current estimates are about 30,600 maybe abortions per year. They have publicly funded abortions as well as self-pay abortions. They set up a board where you have to go and get approved to have an abortion. There's rabbis that sit on the board and social workers. They approved 97% of the abortions. Subsequent to 2014, abortion up to the age of 33 can be provided for under the nationally funded health basket. These abortions have virtually no limitations in number, gestational age, or social variables. And if you're an IDF soldier, you can have abortions. So tell me that makes sense. You're out protecting Israel from people that want to kill Jews, and then you go to the abortion clinic and do away with your Jewish child. So, but Israel is a secular socialist democracy. So even though it's a Jewish state, it's very inclusive, the government. So all different views are represented there. We have about 576 Israeli children dying from abortion every week. There's about 30,000 Jewish abortions in Israel every year, and 2 million Jewish children in Israel have died from abortion since 1948. And in America, about 300 Jewish children die every week in the U.S., 15,600 a year, and about 780,000 Jewish children in the U.S. have died from abortion since 1973. As Jews, we feel the pain and loss of each and every one. And of course, you know, we all know this, that abortion just doesn't do away with one person. That person's offspring, generation after generation, is affected. have a keen sense of injustice and speak out against it without reservation, as in the case of a death row inmate who may be wrongly accused. I spoke about this issue to someone at our synagogue, and he said, yeah, the Catholics did it the right way, because they opposed the death penalty, right, as well as the euthanasia, abortion, theoretically, right? I thought that was an interesting comment. Jews definitely oppose the death penalty for criminals, yet our innocent unborn children have no comparable advocate. Instead, the majority Jewish community actively supports killing them for any reason with no second opinion or legal defense required. But Jewish law guides us to take unprecedented steps to prevent the execution of an innocent person. This was from a letter sent by a bunch of rabbis when New Jersey they were looking for alternatives to the death penalty, and the Jewish rabbis weighed in. And it was wrong, the death penalty was wrong. So I'm still waiting for them to sign a letter like that about the abortion issue. Some compassionate, well-meaning rabbis, doctors, counselors, social workers, and friends of Jewish men and women facing unplanned pregnancy advise abortion as a way to alleviate the suffering and stress that accompany this challenging problem. Lost in the recommendation for abortion is the scientific fact and spiritual truth that abortion ends the life of an innocent child. Can we envision a world where strong Jewish mothers rally to support, love, and feed a mother through her pregnancy and birth and empower her as a mother herself? Jews excel in the details of social justice. Can these skills be focused to support the mother-child unit? Schooling, employment, living arrangements, a supportive community. This is social justice and recognizes the intrinsic value worth of our children and ourselves. You're hard-pressed to find a Jewish pregnancy care organization anywhere. We have one in the United States and several in Israel. But mostly, our synagogues do not have Respect Life organizations. We have all been here. The eugenics movement, popularized and implemented in Germany, first targeted the physically and mentally disabled. Killing these people in order to improve the gene pool found legitimacy in the courts and in public opinion. Once this activity was approved, the legalized killing of Jews followed suit. Condoning abortions of babies with genetic defects starts us down that path again. Determining that any innocent human person should die is outside of Jewish moral teachings. Considering that Jews have historically been categorized as subhuman and exterminated, Jewish justification for aborting due to imperfection defies common sense. We learned of this little baby, Emma. She was a Down syndrome baby. She was put up for adoption. And this woman, Karen Gaffney, is an advocate. She says, every life has value, every life matters, regardless of how many chromosomes you have. Yeah. I met Mr. Don Fetter at a March for Life event years ago. He wrote this in 2018 for a pro-life event. When abortion was legalized in New York State prior to Roe v. Wade, the great Talmudist Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik predicted, and here we go, if you kill a fetus, a time will come when even infants will be killed. Been there, done that. We've gone from abortion to infanticide to euthanasia and doctor-assisted suicide. Instead of acknowledging our common humanity because we were all made in the image of God, increasingly we play God with the lives of others. Deuteronomy 30:19 admonishes, "This day I call the heavens and the earth as witness against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you may live, you and your children." This applies not only to individuals but to nations and civilizations as well. Where are the Babylonians, the Persians, and the Phoenicians? In the words of Mark Twain, they have faded to dream stuff and passed away. Twain added, the Jews saw them all and beat them all, not by any virtue, but by the power of Torah. You choose life and you get life. You choose death and you get death. For more than half a century, we have chosen death. Death by abortion, death by euthanasia, and death by rapidly falling fertility due to a refusal to marry and have children. The choice before us is stark. Blessings or curses, life or death. Sinai or savagery and oblivion. So we do have prophets, other prophets. Yeah. Nate Hentoff was a very liberal Jew, and he kind of broke ranks with his compatriots over this issue. He said, the quality of a society and the hallmark of Judaism is largely defined by how it treats its weakest and most vulnerable members. Killing the innocent is never justified because it relieves others of a burden. It is not a solution to inflict suffering on one person in order that another may avoid it. What defined Nazi Germany as an evil society was its wanton disregard for human life. That disregard surfaced in Hitler's killing of 275,000 handicapped people before he began killing the Jews. Nat discovered reports of experiments in what doctors at Yale New Haven Hospital called early death as a management option for infants considered to have little or no hope of achieving meaningful humanhood. Nat then interviewed happy handicapped adults whose parents could have killed them but didn't. This changed him. He was an early Jewish pro-life activist. Judaism demands a high level of compassion and mercy for the vulnerable and defenseless. No other demographic is as vulnerable as the defenseless child in the womb. We show no compassion for unborn babies who are starved, poisoned, burned, dismembered, and whose skull is punctured and crushed after partial delivery, all done without pain medication. As early as 10 weeks, an unborn baby feels real physical pain during abortion. As Jews, we cannot inflict this torture on innocents. Okay. There's been a lot of research about the after effects of abortion. The Elliott Institute is a wonderful resource. They've done a lot of peer-reviewed research. They have documents that show real physical, reproductive, psychological, and emotional damage directly related to abortion. Immediately, there's medical consequences, including hemorrhage, internal injury, and infection. I get emails from an organization called Operation Rescue that monitors abortion clinic activities. And every week, there's so many emails that come in about women that are harmed. The ambulances come to get them. It's terrible. Immediately after the abortion or years later, women may experience post-abortive depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Long-term effects include increased risks of cancer, miscarriage, and infertility, higher rates of addictive behaviors, and significant mental and emotional problems. Tragically, women die from legal abortion. In the Jewish community, Jewish men and women who suffer after abortion have no networks in place. Rabbis receive little to no training on post-abortive grief. Synagogue membership remains uninformed and uneducated about post-abortive mental health issues. Women's groups are unable to create helpful programming because this is seen as undermining support and advocacy for abortion rights. We also have a wonderful forgiveness and mercy tradition that is often minimized. And one of our most beautiful verses in our Bible is from Exodus, where we talk about God's 13 attributes of mercy, and we apply this in our post-abortion work. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abundant in kindness and truth, who preserves kindness for 1,000 generations, who forgives iniquity, sin, and error, and who cleanses. That's a post-abortive woman. And the men. There's a nice pamphlet I have over there about lost fatherhood. When a Jewish man coerces his partner into abortion, he may feel relief immediately afterward from the social, financial, or religious consequences of claiming fatherhood. Later, though, feelings of anger, resentment, regret, and guilt can surface. Alternatively and tragically, men have no legal rights concerning abortion and may feel powerless to save their own child. Although recently in Alabama, a judge granted a man the legal right to sue after his unborn child was aborted without his permission. This is the first case about this, and I got a forwarded mail from NARAL, very upset about this. Jewish men are told that abortion is legal in Judaism and preferable to single fatherhood or marrying a non-Jewish woman. In many cases, because the baby may be seen as problematic or embarrassing, the adoption option is never explored. Another Jewish baby loses its life. And from our Psalms, as far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgressions from us. So we have our post-abortion healing program. It's called Tikvat Rachel, Rachel's hope for all her children, both born and unborn. And I was sharing earlier today that I wrote this program based on several different sources of post-abortion healing programs, the first of which was Project Rachel. I met the woman who started that in Indiana at a National Right to Life convention, and she was giving a seminar on her post-abortion work, and I attended that seminar. And that's where I first learned about these healing programs. And I eventually wrote this one for Jewish women. This spiritual isolation after abortion compromises the health and happiness of many Jews, often going unacknowledged and unexpressed for decades. A spiritual healing therapy based on the Jewish concept of teshuvah, effectively heals this wound by reconnecting the sufferer to God through confession, sincere contrition, seeking forgiveness, embracing redemption, and moving forward to serve Hashem by helping other suffering souls. The program is free of charge and open to any post-abortive Jew, young or old, male or female, religious or secular. We also offer post-abortion grief training for rabbis, therapists, and professional and peer counselors. And from our mystical tradition, weeping is lodged in one side of my heart and joy is lodged in the other. We have a telephone conference call every Thursday night. We have Jewish post-abortive women that have been through healing that are available to talk one-on-one. We're trying to start face-to-face support groups, and we do have an email study that we do once a year. So here we just have some. Judaism emphasizes the sanctity of human life from conception to natural death, making it incumbent upon Jews to find ways to save lives when dealing with unplanned and unwanted pregnancy. Adoption, marriage, and single parenthood are much better choices for Jews, for anyone, than the intentional killing of an innocent life to avoid embarrassment, inconvenience, or hardship. When pregnancy results from a mistake in judgment or action, killing innocent life is not the answer. So we talk about choosing life avoids perpetuating the anti-Semitic origins of the abortion industry. Choosing life for unborn children saves them from a violent, painful death by abortion, allows them to live with a family, one of our making, or an adoptive one. Many Jewish couples waiting to adopt Jewish babies are willing to give safe haven during pregnancy for women who have no support from family. Many less than perfect babies and babies conceived in less than perfect conditions are very much wanted for adoption. Single parenting can lead to a beautiful future for you and your child. Much help is available. We have the one pregnancy care organization in the United States for Jewish women is called In Shifra's Arms, named after the midwives in the Torah during Pharaoh's Egypt. An organization in Israel, the Committee for the Rescue of Israeli Babies. They do a lot of pregnancy care. And I volunteered for a year or so with Birthright International, a pregnancy care organization in the States. They are non-denominational. They welcome Jewish, Hindu, Muslim people to work there and counsel. Jewish adoption, we have a list of couples waiting to adopt, and then there's a couple other Jewish organizations that provide adoptions for Jewish children. So these are some of the things we can do. Like Beth, she's so wonderful for asking us to speak or to table, request our literature, stop donating to Planned Parenthood, donate to pregnancy care, start Jewish pregnancy care groups, help Jewish women facing unplanned pregnancies seek life-saving options, refer family and friends to our post-abortion healing programs, request professional training in post-abortion grief counseling, and donate or help us save innocent Jewish life. And by all means, go to our website to learn more. And I brought a bunch of stuff. Some of it's our own literature, some of it's general pro-life literature, lots of gifts. Please take whatever you want. Just share all the information that you can take with friends and family. A few final words from some influential people in the Jewish community. This is Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, and this is what he wrote. To be a Jew is to be willing to challenge the prevailing consensus. Power allows us to rule over others without their consent. As the Greek historian Thucydides put it, the strong do what they wish and the weak suffer what they must. Judaism is a sustained critique of power. That is the conclusion I have reached after a lifetime of studying our sacred texts. It is about how a nation can be formed on the basis of shared commitment and collective responsibility. It is about how to construct a society that honors the human person as the image and likeness of God. It is about a vision, never fully realized but never abandoned, of a world based on justice and compassion in which, quote, they will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And from Elie Wiesel, who was, people know him as a Holocaust survivor. He says, we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. And lastly, I just love Rabbi Wasserman. This was what he said about the mystical connection between all human beings. The Jewish soul, a simple thing, at one with God in everything. Oh, I'm done. Thank you all for staying. I know it was long.